Kia ora whānau, it's Pala here. I'm making this video because I've got some very exciting news I want to share with you all about the work that I'm now doing. But before I do that, I just want to mihi to you all. Mi luk save ol tangata whenua pluplisia. Mi luk save every tangata pluplisia. Mi luk save ol rangatira pluplisia. Mi luk save whenua pluplisia. Mi luk save ol latua pluplisia. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Pala Melissa. I'm from Vanuatu. My bloodline's at Taigona on my mum's side, and on my father's side, I'm Tomatavat. And in terms of my work and educational background, I used to teach at Victoria University of Wellington at the business school for 15 years. I resigned in 2018, and my research was looking at the sociology of business. I wanted to understand why we're facing so many of these global catastrophic crises today, because of the way our current social and economic system is built. This capitalist one we're living under, which is amazing for producing all these modern comforts and conveniences and this amazing growth in material wealth, but it's also had this dark side. It's always had this dark side to it because of the way it's based on relentless commodification and expansionism, where it commodifies everything, including the natural world, until exhaustion and collapse, because it's based on that drive for infinite growth. So it just keeps on violating all these social and ecological boundaries. And I wanted to research that to bring attention to the way our social and economic systems are structured, so we can start to have these honest conversations about that. But I'm not at university anymore. I've set up my own company, Soulworks Wellington. So this video is part of announcing that as well. And I do therapy work now. I'm a self-alignment coach, and I'm a certified emotional anatomy therapist. And what I basically do is I help people to address all the things in their lives that keeps them stuck and stressed and blocked off from growing into that bigger life that we've all got inside of us, by teaching you how to reconnect back to yourself and to be true again to who you are. If you're the sort of person who works really hard, loves your partner, loves your family, gives and gives and gives to everyone, friends, family, your community, your work, and you're doing all that because you've got that yearning to have that big life that we all know we've got inside of us, and you want everything. You want the whole cake. But there are times when you've caught yourself looking up at the ceiling at night, asking yourself, is this it? Because no matter how hard you try, something's always off, something's always dysfunctional. Like, for instance, you put so much time into work, but your health starts to suffer, or you put so much time into family that your own self-care starts to suffer, or you have relationship struggles and relationship conflicts, or you have financial troubles, even though you're putting everything that you can into growing in all these areas of your life. If you're struggling with those sorts of issues, this self-alignment work is the work for you, because it's all about expanding your capacity to get everything you want in life and to live your most fulfilling and flourishing life by reconnecting to those parts of ourselves that we run away from, that disempowers us and blocks us off from growing. Given the way our human system's built, we're built to continually grow these capacities to live our most fulfilling and flourishing lives all throughout our life. In terms of physicality, our bodies, we stop growing in height by the time we get to 2024, but this body is built to go all throughout our lives till the day we die, having this beautiful tune and balance in the body that comes from being open and supple and flexible, to the point that, when we're 70, 80, 90 years old, this body is built to still be able to run around, to sprint, to jump, to climb trees, to wrestle with the grandkids until the day we die. That's how this physical system's built. In terms of our minds, we've got this amazing intellect and this creative genius that we've got the capacity to keep growing and to keep intensifying all throughout our lives. So again, till the day we die, this mind just keeps getting sharper and sharper and sharper. And the same thing goes for our emotional capacities. We've got the capacity to grow to the point where we have this emotional grounding and stability to live these incredibly loving and joyful lives, because we live from our core, we're connected to our passions, and we can build our whole lives around doing the things that we love, which puts us at our best and offers the best foundation for contributing to the world with the best of all the gifts and talents that we've got. And all of those potentials, those capacities to grow, they all come down to the nature of our awareness, of our human consciousness. Our awareness is such that we can go throughout our lives deepening the clarity and the intensity of our awareness, not just about things that happen in the external world, but our awareness of our inner life, the life of our feelings, our emotions, and our awareness itself. The more we deepen that clarity and intensity, the more we're able to enjoy all these other capacities for living these loving, joyful, and blissful lives, where we're also giving our best to the world, to our communities, to our countries, and to the world. But if we look at the world today, most people aren't blissed out. Most people are struggling to grow. In fact, most people don't even have that basic physical and mental well-being that offers the best foundation for growth, because of the way we're chronically stuck and stressed in important areas of our lives. And on the outside, the causes of chronic stress might look like it's external to us. It might look like it has to do with our partners, to our boss, our financial situation, and all these other outside things. But if we look deeply at those external circumstances, you'll always find that the root cause of chronic stress is always internal. Chronic stress happens because we go for too long running away from feelings that we don't actually want to face. Feelings that have to do with our fears, insecurities, and anxieties that are in fact tied to all these impulses, these emotional needs and wants that are pushing us to grow if they get met. But because we're afraid of meeting them for various reasons, and a lot of it goes back to childhood, we avoid those uncomfortable and painful feelings that are pushing us to grow. And because we avoid the feelings, we also avoid meeting those needs and wants, and we stop ourselves from growing. And this system is built to grow. When we don't grow, we stay stuck and stressed. And if we keep that avoidance pattern up, the stress just builds and builds over time till our physical, mental, and emotional well-being starts to suffer. And that's where disease and dysfunction comes from. If we look at most of the problems we face today, most of it is rooted in chronic stress. Most of the physical dysfunctions people have, most people can't even move properly with full openness and fluidity in the body. That's not just due to our modern sedentary lifestyle of sitting in chairs and couches and beds all the time. It's also got to do with these emotional blockages that come up in our system whenever we run away from things that we don't want to face, that are actually pushing us to grow. If we think about the global health crisis of all these non-communicable diseases, heart disease, obesity, autoimmune disease, cancer, the vast majority of the cancers, Alzheimer's, heart disease, high blood pressure, all of these endemic non-communicable diseases have their basis in chronic stress, and chronic stress itself is just a symptom of blocked growth, of running away for too long from feelings that you don't want to face that are actually pushing you to grow. Okay? And even if we think about like global crises like climate change, like all these intensifying military conflicts, the pollution crisis, all these major global crises, they're being produced by social systems that we live under today, like industrial capitalism, like all these patriarchal cultures that are based on disconnection from the wider natural world and from everyone else below and these social hierarchies we live in. But that disconnection itself from other people is rooted in self-disconnection, because it's that self-disconnection, not feeling anymore, running away from our feelings, that stops us from being able to feel and connect with everyone else outside of us. So again, most of the problems we face today, doesn't matter if we're talking about these big global crises or we're talking about financial problems, relationship problems, work problems, most of them comes down to self-disconnection. It's that self-disconnection that causes the dysfunction over time. So the self-realignment process that I take people through and that I teach in my coaching and therapy work, it's designed to address all these emotional blockages that are stopping you from growing because of the feelings that you've been running away from, you've been avoiding for a while. It's designed to get you clear about all the things that you're running away from and facing those fears, getting clear about all those things you're doing to yourself to keep yourself stuck and stressed, looking at the choices you make, how you interact with people, and what all those things say about the limiting self-beliefs that you've got in your head, and also the emotional fears that you're running away from, and the emotional needs and the wants behind them. This process is designed to get you clear about all that, and also to get you clear about what you need to do, the actions that you need to take in order to get back into alignment with yourself. So you address those unmet needs and wants that are pushing you to grow, and so you can be true again to who you are. You can get back into alignment again with who you are, and you can start growing again. And it's also a beautiful system, this therapy work that I do, because it gives you that overall physical, mental, and emotional well-being that offers the best foundation for going after your biggest life. It'll give you the physical tune of bringing balance back into your body. It'll give you the courage that comes from facing those fears you've been running away from. It'll also give you the creativity of going into all those emotional places that you've never been before, that you've been avoiding by running away from those feelings. It'll give you the self-honesty of accepting that stuff you've been running away from and also owning it. And most of all, it'll give you the power of knowing who you are, knowing what your inner truths are, the needs and wants and the core values you need to be true to, you need to honor in order to start growing again, to start growing beyond that chronic stress and that avoidance pattern that's causing it, that you've been stuck in. So that's the work that I'm now doing, whānau. And how do we do this? How do I take people through this process of self-alignment? The basic principle, the foundational principle of all this work is that you're stuck and stressed because you're not paying enough attention, you're not having enough awareness about the feelings and the emotions that are inside you. You're not conscious of those things anymore. So all of this self-alignment work is awareness training, self-awareness training. And there's 3 things in particular that we pay attention to when we do this work. When you come and work with me, we're going to pay really close attention to what you say, the languages and the stories that you tell yourself that are in your head that actually prevents you from getting that clarity, because they're all based on this avoidance pattern. And once we start talking, there's a structure I take you through where you put those stories, those thoughts down on paper, and I'll teach you how to notice how you use this disempowering language and this framing to keep avoiding these feelings and these issues that you're running away from, that keeps you stuck and stressed. And the other thing that I do as an entry point into paying attention to what you feel is we pay really close attention to what you do. And what that means is I pay really close attention to your body, your posture, your actions, and your choices. That's where the modality of emotional anatomy therapy comes in that I use. And the basic principle of emotional anatomy is if life is one, if we can't separate the mind and our emotions from this physical structure of our bodies, it basically means all our emotional blockages that we've got, all the fears we're running away from, all the chronic stresses we feel inside, they're literally written on how our body is currently shaped. You know, if we're tight in certain places, we're overweight in certain places, we're losing muscle mass in certain places, these are all outward expressions of those internal psychological and emotional dynamics. And equally, all the personality, the psychological personality traits we've got, they're actually expressed in how this whole body is structured, how our face looks. We can do an emotional anatomy face analysis that'll provide an amazing reading of all your personality traits, all your strengths, all your challenges, all your core values, all your shadow values. So reading the body in this symbolic way in terms of their psychological and emotional meanings is a really powerful way to reconnect back to yourself, to learn about yourself more deeply and learn about all those things that you might be running away from that are keeping you stuck and stressed. And the other principle to keep in mind about why it's so important to use the body, this is the first temple, that we're born with, that we take throughout our lives to navigate our way through life. We can think about and we can read all these other things, but this is the closest thing and one of the most powerful things we can use to reconnect, to deep dive into ourselves and to reconnect to ourselves. The body, remember, the body never lies. Every single memory, emotion, feeling, and thought we ever have is stored somewhere in this body. So we can use it as a powerful portal and entry point to do the self-realignment work and to reconnect back to ourselves. So I do symbolic interpretations of the body. I also look at your posture. Your posture that's part of the emotional anatomy assessment. But how your body can move, how it rests, is it fully open? Can it sit on the floor comfortably, on the ground comfortably? Can it squat? Does it move with fluidity? These will all tell us really important things about your internal psychological dynamics. So we look at what you say and also what you do, your body, your posture, your actions and your choices as well in different areas of your life. If you're stuck and stressed and the language and the stories you tell yourself in your head have this avoidance pattern to them, it'll also come out in your everyday choices, the things you choose to do in different areas of your life that keeps that avoidance pattern in place and that keeps you stuck and stressed. This process will teach you how to pay attention to it and how to start resolving it. And once we do that kind of deep diving, then the next things we do is we get really, there's a process for getting really clear about what you want, the outcome that you actually want, and then we go on to identify the actual actions that you want to start taking in order to start moving and to start embodying and living what it is that you actually want. And that's when you start getting back into alignment with yourself. When you start taking these actions will start to activate that self-healing mechanism we've got all inside, and you'll start to claim your power back through action. This work is all about action-based healing, this self-realignment work. You start taking that massive action, that's where your life's going to change. And this is life-changing stuff, I know, because it develops all these traits that we need to live our biggest lives. And I personally know how life-changing it is, not only because of the work that I've done with other people, other clients, and I've seen the growth that they've had in their life, but also this is actually the process I went through after I resigned from uni in 2018. in order to heal from my own issues, my own chronic stresses. Like if you looked at my life before I resigned from Victoria University back in 2018, on the outside it looked like I had a pretty wonderful life. And in a lot of ways I did have a really fulfilling life for all these reasons. You know, I had a beautiful family that always supported me in everything I did. I had this incredibly privileged academic job at Victoria University. I was a young up-and-coming academic who'd already established myself in these research fields, and I filled up my life doing all these things that I loved. You know, even when I was full-time teaching and doing my PhD, I was also training for qualifying for the Olympic Games and to go to the Commonwealth Games, which I ended up doing. And I filled up my life with all this poetry and writing that was part of my academic work as well. And I always took I took a lot of pride in having integrity when it came to speaking honestly about a lot of the social and political issues that I talked about. The ongoing realities of colonization in the Pacific, what Pacific communities are facing in terms of the quality of our education system and the impacts of climate change throughout the Pacific. I always took a lot of pride in being honest and upfront about what I felt to be true when it came to talking about all these issues. So on the outside, my life looked like it was going pretty well, but there were always two areas of my life where I felt deeply disconnected from myself, where I lacked integrity, the integrity of being true to myself. And one of those areas had to do with my teaching at university. I loved being an academic, loved Victoria in terms of being able to write and research. But when it came to actual teaching, if you looked at the courses that I used to teach down at business school, most of what I taught was just rote learning. All I did was I taught students how to rote learn, memorize, and apply all these analytical business models without going any further in terms of investigating their real life impacts. You know, these are the models that are causing so much of these crises today, but none of that critical interrogation took place at all. I didn't do much of that at all. And also, I did none of the deep diving that I now do as part of this therapy work, that I teach people in this therapy work, which is actually the essence of education. You know, the essence of education is self-education, diving into yourself, to deeply question your self-beliefs, to find out what you're running away from in order to face them so you can become more whole and you can grow as a result. And that's the basis for deep diving into whatever particular intellectual discipline you're doing. But most of what I taught had none of that emotional literacy, had none of that deep diving at all. So I always felt, even from the start, that I was living this fraudulent life because I wasn't bringing the best of myself when it came to teaching students. I always struggled with feeling like I wasn't doing justice to students who came to be taught by me in my classes. And when it came to my personal life, that feeling of not having integrity, of living a lie, was even stronger, because I went for years doing this thing of emotionally closing down on my partners and not telling them how I really felt about whenever we were discussing issues that brought up feelings about me that didn't seem to fit with the idea I had in my head or what a strong and loving partner should do or should feel. And that was particularly the case with issues of commitment. For a long time, I used to have this deep fear that if I truly committed to someone, to my partner, and did something like got married, bought a house, had kids, I'd be so snowed under by the weight of those extra responsibilities and obligations that I'd lose my freedom to do all these other things that I also loved and wanted to do. And at that time, with my ex-wife, before we got married, I was doing things like teaching full-time, doing the PhD, trying to qualify for the Olympic Games and Commonwealth Games for weightlifting, doing all these other projects as well. And I always feared that if I loaded myself with these extra responsibilities that would come with more commitment, that I'd lose that freedom. And of course, the best thing I could have done was actually just share my my feelings with her, to tell her I had all these fears and these anxieties about commitment. But I chose not to do that. I didn't want to do that. I was unwilling to do that because I didn't want to come across as uncommitted. And I also didn't want to come across as selfish if I told her that I wasn't willing to give less time and energy to all these other things that I wanted to do as well. And I was trying to have both, the relationship and to maintain my freedom to do all these things. So what I did instead was, I didn't tell her anything. I kept avoiding all these issues. I kept avoiding talking about my actual feelings whenever we talked about marriage or having kids. So I did all these things that were so dysfunctional, that made our relationship dysfunctional, because I was trying to keep that avoidance pattern in place. Like, I'd keep things up in the air. I'd keep on putting off marriage plans. I'd avoid conversation. I'd always have some excuse for why it wasn't the right time to buy a house, or why it wasn't the right time to have kids, which of course frustrated her. And when she complained that I hardly saw her because I was training and working and wasn't making much time for our relationship, instead of just seeing what she was saying as she was just missing me and wanted to spend more time with me, I projected my own anxieties and fears. I avoided taking self-responsibility for feeling those anxieties, and I blamed her for not supporting me when she said those things. Same thing when we talked about marriage and I felt the pressure to get married. I blamed her for pressuring me, whereas the pressure was actually coming from myself, from being unwilling to actually talk about my feelings. And this went on for years, and then we ended up getting married. And because we got married and I still had all these fears in me, I couldn't run away from them anymore. And all the resentment that I was storing up at my family and at her for pressuring me, forcing me to get married, all that came out. And I thought I had to choose between either my freedom or to go down this path of deepening my commitments to my partner and to my relationship. And I chose to get out because I couldn't see how I could have both. So I sabotaged the relationship. I had an affair, never told her, withheld that fact from her for years, ended up accusing her of having her own affair, used that as a pretext to get out of my marriage so I could have the freedom to throw myself into the PhD and to do all these other things, like go to Commonwealth Games and to try to qualify for the Olympics. And I was, that was such for me, that was such an amazing thing to do, because I was able to fulfill all these things that I really wanted to do. But looking back, it was also one of the most painful things I've ever done, because I didn't need to actually choose between relationship and maintaining my freedom to do all these things. It was my avoidance pattern that made me think, that led me to think that it was an either or choice. I didn't need to choose. And so when I got into my next relationship, because I hadn't faced any of these fears and broken that avoidance pattern, I did exactly the same thing to my next partner. And I made our own relationship dysfunctional by constantly avoiding talking about my feelings when it came to commitment and when it came to relationship. And it was at that point that I actually started to realize that the problem had nothing to do with my partners. They're both beautiful women, beautiful people. It had everything to do with me. It had everything to do with all the stuff that I was continually avoiding. So that's when I resigned from Vic. And when I resigned from Vic, I told everyone was to write books. I didn't write a single word of those books I was saying I was going to write, because the real reason I resigned was just to give myself the time and space just to get clear about why I had these things in me. I had these avoidance patterns in me. And in order to get that clarity, I went old school. Back home, when we need to get clarity, we go to the bush. All I did was I sat under these puhutukawa trees down the park and down the bush, down here in Wellington, for 12 months until I started getting that clarity. The more and more I sat and just listened to my body And all my body was saying at that point was just slow down, be still, and feel again. Feel into the body. I started realizing how tight I am, how much of this chronic stress that I've been accumulating by not being true to myself for a long time was being stored in the system. And I also started to get clear that the way to heal and to get your integrity back, to be whole again, is actually to start practicing facing my feelings and to start having all these uncomfortable conversations that especially with my loved ones in my life that I'd been avoiding for years. So I started off with my father. For my birthday last year, I went to visit my father, and I spent a week with him for my birthday, and we had this amazing time of sharing these conversations about growing up, my childhood growing up. I talked about how hurt I felt about some of the things he did growing up, in terms of how he treated me. I also shared how hurt I felt by some of the ways that he treated Mum in their own relationship. And hearing his own story, hearing his own experiences, man, I got to see a side of him that I'd never seen before. This vulnerable, soft side to him that, man, really brought us closer together. And I could feel just the healing all throughout my body because of being able to let go of all these long-standing resentments that I'd been holding on to. And that's when also I started on this path of doing this emotional anatomy training, which I've ended up becoming qualified in as an emotional anatomy consultant or therapist, where I went over to Brisbane to get trained at Soul Space, amazing emotional anatomy training institute, and where I shared things like having the affair after I got married with these people that I'd never admitted before. I talked about my feelings of suffocation when it came to commitment. I talked about those fears. I came back to New Zealand after the training. I told my ex all about it, about the affair, about my own feelings. And man, that was some of the most uncomfortable things I've ever done, because we were still really close and we'd reconnected again after we'd separated over the years. And I was really scared that telling her would actually end our relationship altogether. But I still took the jump to tell her because I wanted her to be able to choose whether or not to keep me in her life anymore, knowing all these things that I didn't want to withhold all these things from her and withhold that choice from her anymore. And even though it was uncomfortable, man, the growth that I experienced from it, there's some of the things that I've never experienced before. Like I've had issues with toughened skin, scleroderma over the years, which is chronic stress based. So much of that started clearing up. I had all these white hairs from Mum dying in 2002, and over the years of the stress of PhD and work and all these other things and relationship issues, obviously, a lot of my white hair started going black again. And most of all, my body started unraveling. I used to do a lot of stretching before. Everything still felt stuck and stressed because I wasn't dealing with the emotional blockages. After I've started having all these uncomfortable conversations, man, my body's just unraveling like crazy. I can feel I'm going to get that 25-year-old suppleness back of being able to do things like, do the full splits, which I used to be able to do. That's what this sort of inner work, the self-realignment work, can give you, especially if you add it onto the kind of archetypal movement, postural practices that I teach as part of this self-realignment work as well. And it's not just physical changes that I experienced. I also experienced, man, all these changes to do with my awareness. I was always really sharp as an academic in terms of being able to read people's social and political understandings, especially for their blind spots. I know when people are dodging important issues, especially around issues of power, issues of social hierarchy, issues of exploitation. But now doing this emotional work, my ability to be able to read people in terms of their own emotional blockages, their personality dynamics. All that started going through the roof, and it's made doing this therapy work so natural and easy for me. And that's just another example of the kind of transformational changes that this inner work can do. And finally, I got this vision that I'm actually able to build a business and to develop a self-alignment curriculum that I can teach people that actually pulls together and synthesizes all my strengths, my academic training and the liberal arts traditions of like sociology, politics and philosophy and economics, that draws on my experience as an athlete in bringing physical tune and balance back to the body, and also all this emotional anatomy training work now, all the poetry and all the symbology that's associated with reading people and reading bodies symbolically for their psychological and emotional meanings. And that's what I'm doing now, and that's what I'm saying, Whānau. This work can reconnect you back to your gifts and talents, which just supercharges the growth you can have in your life again. So that's really what I wanted to share with you, Whānau. And I want you to get in touch with me. Click the button below if you want to make an appointment. Share this stuff with your friends. Tell them that I'm doing this work now. I do one-on-one work. I do couples therapy as well. I'll also be teaching these professional development workshops later on in the year that will teach academics and teachers and any other professional how to incorporate these self-alignment principles into their own teaching practice or their own professional practice. So yeah, Whānau, that's it. Get in touch with me. Last thing as well, because this is also celebrating the launch of the website, I'm also offering a special deal. My normal rates are $130 for an hour and a half session. I'm offering 10 sessions for an hour of an hour and a half each for an upfront fee of $500. And if you and you can go in with other people to come up with that $500 upfront fee. You can share those 10 sessions amongst yourselves, but it'll give you the chance for me to take you through the whole self-alignment process. We'll do a body realignment, a postural analysis work, where it will teach you how to get your physical tune back and balance back into your body. We'll do a full emotional anatomy assessment, face analysis, overall body shape analysis. You'll learn what your personality traits are, your gifts and talents, your blockages, just by reading the body. And we'll take you through the whole self-realignment process. So that's it, Whānau. Click the button below to make an appointment. If you're struggling with physical issues, body image issues, relationship issues, if you're struggling with financial issues, all these things we can address by getting clarity about the stuff that we're avoiding. This is what this work does. So let's make 2020, this leap year, the year of our biggest growth, Whānau. I want to be busy this year, so get in touch. I'll be back in touch again soon. I'll be making some more videos talking about this work. So look out for it, and talk again soon. Love you all.